This is Kat Klingensmith with Retro Crime. This historical crime was a huge scandal, and the public devoured the soap opera twists and turns. On July 10th, 1935, Martha Westwood was murdered by her husband, James Westwood, better known as Squire Westwood, Czar of the Bottoms. The Bottoms are a section of McKees Rocks, which is a beat-up town along the river outside of Pittsburgh. I looked into buying a house there in case the town was ever revitalized. Because I had kids, I checked out the Megan's Law website. This area, it was a whole rainbow of different offenses. Before industry died, it was a thriving town settled by Eastern European immigrants. And at the bottom of the hill, by the train tracks and an Indian burial mound, there's a separate pocket called the Bottoms. In the 1930s, the most powerful person in the Bottoms was the local justice of the peace, James Westwood, known as Squire Westwood. He was handsome, charming, well-dressed, and had the morals of an alley cat. His wife, Martha, however, she was as virtuous as he was a scumbag. Martha was formerly known as Martha Winkler, and at 16, she was called the most beautiful girl in McKees Rocks. Against her parents' wishes, she married 19-year-old Jimmy Westwood. James came from a working-class immigrant family like hers. His parents were from England, and his dad brought the family to Pittsburgh, where mills were paying a fair wage to immigrants willing to put in the long hours. James' father became a steelworker, just like my father-in-law and my father-in-law's father. James was ambitious. He went to college, then to law school. After working as a constable for many years, he was elected as the district judge. He and Martha had 4 kids and what seemed like a perfect, lovely family, to outsiders at least. People in the Bottoms knew about James' affairs. He didn't bother hiding it well. People like Westwood don't worry about consequences. They think that they're above the rules and that they're outsmarting everyone. A string of tragedies hit their family in quick succession. In January of 1931, James killed a pedestrian with his car. It was ruled an accident, and there were no legal consequences. He was having legal consequences for other reasons. During his last election, he was caught throwing out votes for his 70-year-old opponent, whose house someone bombed. James was also in hot water for taking money for cases that were never in his courtroom. But he continued working, thanks to his friends in high places. In 1932, the Westwoods' 14-year-old daughter, Clara, shot herself in the stomach in her parents' bedroom. She used the gun James had bought Martha a few months prior. James found her, and she died a couple of weeks later from pneumonia. During that time, she cried often about how she didn't want to die. It was determined to be an accident. I can see how take it out, set it on one's lap, pick it up, and boom, goes off in the stomach. After James' trial for killing his wife, detectives sniffed around to see if Clara was actually murdered. A friend of Clara's spoke up and told the detectives that Clara often threatened to kill herself as a manipulation tactic. Not too long before she died, Clara's friend visited the house, and Clara took out the gun, pointed it to her temple, and said she wasn't afraid to die. Her friend called her bluff, that it wasn't loaded, and Clara opened it and showed that, indeed, it was loaded. The friend ran out the door. 6 months later, the gun was used again. The Westwoods lived with Martha's parents, the Winklers. They were a sweet, happy couple in their golden years. What seemed to be out of nowhere, Martha's dad shot his wife and himself. No one could explain the motive for the murder-suicide. After that, James got rid of the gun. Then, in February of 1935, while the kids were at school and James was at the office, the Westwoods' place was bombed. Martha was taking a nap and miraculously survived without any injuries. The theory was that Squire Westwood had made some enemies in his career of sending people to jail. The Westwoods moved 2 doors down to live in the second-floor apartment of friends while their place was being renovated. Martha was excited because they were getting new, fancy gadgets. They were due to move in on July 26th. They were having a move-in party, a 21-year-old anniversary party, and celebrating Martha's 37th birthday. The walls in this apartment were thin. The neighbors could hear them fight often, mostly about James rarely being home and running around with other women. Martha still participated in the community, as did her kids, Bertha, who was 18, Martha, who was 11, and James Jr., who was 7. July 10, 1935, was a hot, stuffy night. Around 2 a.m., 3 shots were fired, and only a few people heard it because their window fans were buzzing so loudly. Someone had climbed up the back stairs to where the Westwoods lived, stood on the back patio, and shot Martha Westwood in the face through her open window. Bertha came running and asked her mother if she heard the shots, and when she didn't get an answer, she saw the blood and realized what had happened. Little James was sleeping next to his mom on the other side of the bed. Bertha called police and family and told her Aunt Ella Winkler, "Dad did this." Except it couldn't be him. He had an airtight alibi. At the time of the murder, witnesses placed him at a nightclub 6 miles away. Not only that, several hours before he went to the club, he had offered to pick up Officer Monahan and his son early in the morning to take them fishing because the officer's car was in the shop. True to his word, he had picked them up in the early hours and brought them to the McKees Rocks police station to meet a constable who was joining them. They noticed something was happening because neighbors and law enforcement were in the streets. A man ran over and told them that there was trouble. Martha Westwood had been shot in her sleep. James' brother William found him and asked, "How could you, Jimmy?" And James protested and said, "I was with Officer Monahan, who was standing right next to him." Officer Monahan, who was a detective, concurred and didn't think for a second that James Westwood could have done it. James went to his home, and when he saw his wife's body, he sobbed, hugged, and kissed her. He got blood all over his hands. His children watched this display of grief, and Bertha regretted accusing him to her aunt. After that, Bertha claimed that she never said her dad killed her mom, and if Aunt Ella didn't change her story, Bertha would make her look like a liar. Detective Monahan started wondering how James had too perfect of an alibi. Somehow James had made him, the lead detective in a murder case, the alibi for the lead suspect. Not only that, it was strange for Squire Westwood to offer to take them fishing. They weren't buddies. James was given a paraffin test, and it came back positive for gunpowder. James was arrested and charged with murder. The prosecution tried poking holes in James' alibi, but they couldn't. The nightclub owner, Eddie Payton, and his wife vouched for him, as did a lounge singer, Constable Tim Drexler, who had been on a double date with him that night, and their dates. They were a couple of young married women, and the press referred to them as party girls. All of these people accounted for James' whereabouts. But 2 people said otherwise. George Matuza and Sophia Sahar saw James Westwood running from the murder scene. George was a steelworker from Yugoslavia who had known the Westwoods since before they were even married. He had 9 children, and they lived around the corner from the Westwoods. The gunshots woke George, who then went and looked out his window. He had a clear view of the alley, and James had stopped in front of him to look around to see if anyone had seen him. George moved away from the window quickly because he was afraid James would shoot him if he saw him. Before he could testify in court, he died in a freak accident at work. The safety switch was accidentally bypassed, and you can't see me, but I'm using air quotes over accidentally, and George got stuck and was crushed. Suddenly, Sophia, the second witness, she recounted her story. Then a surprise witness was brought to the stand. She was an elderly private detective and had gotten the young Ukrainian mother, Sophia Sahar, to admit that she had seen James Westwood outside of her window that night. Sophia was up trying to soothe her teething baby. When she heard the shots, she looked out her window and got a clear look at James Westwood's face, who had stopped under the streetlight, then turned around and ran in the other direction, past George Matuza's house. When she told her husband, he hit her and yelled at her to shut up because she was going to get killed. So she wrote what she saw in her Bible in her Ukrainian dialect and wrote that if something happened to her, it's because James Westwood had her killed. Sophia denied all of this in court. A couple of blocks over at the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Sophia's priest, Father Dennis, was urging anyone with information to tell the police. James heard this and told Father Dennis to stop because it didn't look good to have all these detectives around. Father Dennis refused, and James threw a tizzy fit and snapped, "I thought we were friends," and left in a huff. Sophia went to Father Dennis for spiritual advice. Then she very bravely risked her life and testified, "I couldn't have done this with a baby at home, not after what happened to George Matuza." Sophia swore that she saw James Westwood and no one else. Sophia was among the women the press called the Parade of Beauties. An uncanny amount of testimonies in court were given by beautiful young women. They included Sophia Sahar, the party girls, the lounge singer, the nightclub owner's wife, James' secretary, a 15-year-old girl James hit on, Bertha Westwood, and a hairdresser who saw Westwood argue with his wife and told him, "If I were married to you, I'd show you something." To which he replied, "If I were married to you, I'd show you something too." I would like to have seen what she would have shown him. Constable Drexler, James' buddy that night, got in a horrible car accident on his way to the courthouse. He was sent to the hospital. The most important witness was James' date that night, Peg Moran. She was 4'9" and had known James for 4 years. During the time the murder happened, she said they were in the parking lot behind the nightclub in his car. She said he never left her sight. If James Westwood had as much sense as ego, the case would have been closed. Instead of showing Peg any appreciation for saving his life, James stated under oath, "May I be struck blind and never see my children again, and may I rot in my grave if I know anyone named Peg Moran." If you ever thought that you weren't smart enough for law school, keep in mind that James Westwood went to law school and passed the bar, and he was such an idiot. Plenty of people in the nightclub noticed the czar of the bottoms with a 4'9" date and told the police just as much. James suddenly changed his story and said that, yes, he knew Peg Moran, but he only knew her for a year and didn't know her name. Somehow he thought not knowing the name of a woman he'd been having an affair with painted him in a better light. The prosecution had some good character witnesses. A 15-year-old girl James had known since she was a small child claimed he called her into his office and offered her a beer. He asked her if she liked boys and to come by later so that he could show her a good time. James' rebuttal was that he was giving her fatherly advice. Another witness claimed that he saw Squire Westwood making out with his secretary's sister on a street corner and called him out on his immoral behavior, to which James responded by punching him in the face. James' rebuttal for this was that the man had insulted a woman and he was defending her honor. His sister-in-law, Ella, quoted the Westwood daughter, Bertha, saying, "Dad did this." Ella also pointed out that James had changed the light bulb in the bedroom that week to a dimmer one, a 7.5-watt one. Bertha called Aunt Ella a liar, just as she had promised, but yeah, the bulb had been changed. Speaking of liars, Peg Moran didn't appreciate being humiliated after committing perjury to spare her friend from the electric chair. Her memory of events changed, and as it turns out, James had been out of her sight that night. After their romp in his car, he told her to go back inside, but she stayed in his car, probably crying about her choices in life because penicillin hadn't come around yet. James Westwood and Tim Drexler were gone for half an hour. When they returned, James demanded all of them hurry up and leave so that he could pick up Officer Monahan and his son for their fishing trip. Peg Moran was in his car this entire time. She passed a lie detector test. James Westwood refused to take one, and his lawyer said that the nitrates on his hands from the paraffin test weren't gunpowder, but something else he must have touched. The detectives drove several routes from the nightclub to the murder site, and they were able to make a round trip in 20 minutes. Without speeding, I can make a round trip from the Primanti Brothers, where the lounge used to be, to the back of Westwood's place in 26 minutes. The house is exactly the same. The back of it is open to an alley. Someone can climb up the stairs to the second-story back porch where the bedroom windows are. With Peg's confession, there is now a barely wide enough window for Westwood to have committed the murder. James Westwood was found guilty and the jury recommended mercy, so instead of the death sentence, he was given life in prison. When Constable Drexler heard that his buddy had been found guilty, he suddenly dropped his friendly demeanor and said, "I have no comment." Since he smartly kept his mouth shut, he was acquitted as an accessory. In 1921, James got to leave the prison for the first time to do a work program for the day. The warden praised him for his exemplary behavior since he arrived, and this was his reward. James fell from scaffolding and died instantly. 8 years after his trial, 8 people were charged and found guilty with falsifying evidence in James Westwood's murder trial. Yet the verdict wasn't overturned. Was Squire Westwood guilty, or was this a plot to remove him from power? Peg Moran changed her testimony out of spite. Aunt Ella was grieving her sister, whose husband was a cheater, and, as my husband noticed, the only witnesses in town were a man with 9 kids and a woman with a teething infant, so the most sleep-deprived people in town. Perhaps someone was out to get him. Since the bad luck started with him killing the pedestrian, I wondered, who on earth did he hit? It was an Italian who, unfortunately, had an extended family that was the stereotype of Italians during Prohibition. Jason and I dismissed this as anything retaliatory because they would have struck faster and they would have gone after him, not his family. Killing family is a manipulation tactic. So is someone trying to manipulate a judge into doing his bidding? James Westwood had friends in high places. He ran the Bottoms of McKees Rocks, not McKees Rocks itself. That was controlled by Miles Bryan, and Squire Bryan was far more powerful than Westwood. He made sure McKees Rocks stayed Republican and was willing to turn to any means necessary to keep his henchmen in power. Places got bombed, people got hurt, elections got rigged. Democrats and independents weren't safe to run against a Republican in office like James Westwood. Maybe James defied Miles Bryan. I doubt it. Squire Bryan was dirty, and Squire Westwood was a pig. My conclusion is that, as usual, there was no conspiracy, just selfishness. We don't know if his in-laws were murdered, but if they were, an enemy wouldn't kill someone's in-laws. Maybe in some cases a friend might. The Winklers probably hated James, who hated them right back, and with them gone, he could have their property without being reminded of what a bad husband he is. The bombings were probably on his orders. In his line of work, he was bound to meet a bomb maker who didn't want prison time. The bomber happened to strike when only Martha would have been home. So yes, of course he killed his wife. It's almost always the husband. The powerful Tsar was tired of being told what a bad husband he is, and he was tired of Martha's existence making him look bad when he committed adultery. He was tired of feeling like a bad father when he was told to come home and be a father to his children. Not a whole lot of people knew where Martha's bedroom was and that she'd be sleeping with her head near the window, which would be open in the summer. The killer could arrive, point, shoot, and escape within minutes. The apartment was the perfect layout, so this needed to be done before they moved back to their old house. I'm certain that's exactly what happened. James Westwood ran to the window, shot, ran away, went the wrong way, then turned around and ran to Constable Drexler's still running car, which I'm guessing was parked in front of the Russian Orthodox Church next to George Matuza's house, because then no one would be there to see them. James wasn't hysterical with grief when he saw his wife. He purposely got her blood on his hands because he was trying to cover the gunpowder and any blood spatter. But how could he shoot his wife in the face? Because she wasn't beautiful anymore to him. After 4 kids and 20 years, she gained weight and looked older. This made her worthless to him. He only valued much younger women who looked a certain way. Martha was still a perfectly lovely woman. She just didn't look like she had at 16. She looked like a mother turning 37. Who knows what happened between James Westwood and his mother, but whatever it was gave him a disordered attachment to women. I'm guessing she withheld attention or is sickly. He grew up with an emptiness inside where her love should have been, so his self-esteem had to come from outside sources like being a big fish in a small pond and sleeping with young women that he could have power over. He couldn't get emotionally attached because he feared they would reject him, just like his mother did. I'm not trying to lack empathy when I say this. This is as cliche as it gets. Then the foundation of his misogyny was cemented by a society where way too many people fear women in power. It would be nice to say that he was a product of his time, but clearly we are electing men just like him to even more powerful positions. Now they're even less educated, less intelligent, and even less attractive. No one is being blinded by beauty. Men with the exact same backstory, hence the same product. They belong in outpatient behavioral health facilities, not in elections. In fairness, we elect people who represent the people. They do represent a lot of people. men of different races and religions who would rather be rounded up and put on trains before allowing a woman to be in charge, unless she's a misogynist too. Then they'll crack open the door. Martha Westwood wasn't a misogynist. She endured a tremendous amount of pain. Despite the rumors about her husband, she held her head high and still volunteered in the community. She was also smart. She couldn't divorce the local judge when he ran the community and was a henchman for the man controlling the city. It would have only resulted in a smear campaign against her because that's what men like James Westwood do. Look what he did to Paige Moran, who was saving his life. James didn't care about destroying his family. It didn't matter to him that he killed the mother of his children while their 7-year-old boy was sleeping next to her. Bertha played mom for a bit, then married and moved away. James Jr. became a ward of some neighbors, and Martha was sent to boarding school. Because James Westwood was so corrupt, it's hard to know what was a coincidence and what was of his own making. Sometimes I worry that I'm falsely accusing people in this podcast. Like, I have no proof that Frankie Tappan killed his neighbor because he caught him with his mother, and I have no proof that Ignace Dombrowski molested his nephew. I hope I'm wrong about them, and if I am, I hope everything I've said has been taken with all the salt in the shaker. What I hope I'm right about is the people I think are innocent. Also, why inexcusable crimes can still be understandable. The problem with people like James Westwood is that he's guilty of so many heinous things. It's hard to believe he's not guilty of everything. Like after the murder trial, his daughter's death being investigated. If he could kill her mom, then maybe he could kill her too. Or maybe it was the worst day of his life. Maybe he didn't kill his in-laws. What he's guilty of is buying the murder weapon, keeping it loaded, and making it easily accessible. That's the legacy of Squire Westwood, the fallen czar. Even when he's innocent, he's guilty.